Welcome to the Prime Health Podcast with your host, Dr. Derek Barron. Dr. Barron interviews doctors, wellness experts, and healthcare leaders who are revolutionizing how we approach health and longevity. The Prime Health Podcast explores breakthrough science, personal and patient stories, and practical insights that are shaping the future of health and wellness. So sit back, listen in, and prepare to transform how you think about your path towards Prime Health with Dr. Barron and his special guest.
Welcome back to the Prime Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Derek Barron, and I'm here to bring you cutting-edge insights and practical strategies from leading healthcare experts for your journey to prime health in life and in business. Today's episode is going to be very unique in the fact that we have Leah Braddell in the house from Data Biologics, and she will talk to us about how they transform real-world data into actionable insights, helping you measure success, drive repeat business, and build a recognized reputation for exceptional patient care. So I think we should all be excited to hear about that. Now, before we dive in, just a quick message from our sponsor, Grow Solutions, because brilliant healthcare professionals shouldn't have to choose between lifestyle and business growth. We handle the business side so you can focus on what you do best. Now, Grow Solutions, we do our best to eliminate a lot of headaches in there, whether it's driving new patients, new clients into your practice or your business, patient communication breakdowns that can happen, and sometimes operational chaos like implementing proven systems and frameworks. And yes, we help you implement AI and agents into the practice or your business. It's coming. It's hard to avoid it. We just have to make sure we can do that. And I know Leah is going to share some information on AI as well today with us. So Grow Solutions is not an agency or vendor. We're a partner with you. So if you've ever thought this, I'm too busy to grow, I'm too slow to scale, or too overwhelmed to fix it, we can be your solution. Just drop the word grow in below or feel free to reach out to me on any social platform. Now, you came here for a reason, and that is to meet our guest. Today's guest is Leah Braddell, CEO of Data Biologics, a company pioneering the use of real-world evidence to transform medicine. Leah's mission is to make clinical data accessible and meaningful, not just for scientists and corporations, but for doctors and patients themselves. Passionate advocate for alternative and regenerative treatments, and she believes the future of healthcare depends on restoring public trust in science by grounding it in the lived experiences of patients. Lee also brings a critical eye to the rise of AI in medicine, warning that without clean data, today's algorithms risk doing more harm than good. That's going to be interesting to hear about that. So Leah, welcome to the Prime Health Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Now, we've had physicians come on here, we've had clinicians, but you're the first person that's from a data perspective. So this is going to be unique learning for me and all of us to see how, as a patient or as a clinician, I could use it both ways. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah. I'd consider myself sort of a lifelong physician sidekick. So while I might not have been treating patients with my own hands, I was typically right there next to the doctor who is trying something new for the first time and in working or helping convince patient that an alternative to the status quo and the gold standard might be worthwhile for them. So very, very close with many, many physicians and all different specialties throughout my career. And that's probably the best way to sum up my experiences as your sidekick along the way and interpreting the data. Like, like in the spy movies, you've got the data truck somebody sits out there with. Okay, I'm going to tell you that was me to many, many physicians throughout my career.
I'm sure you've heard some great stories and you learned a ton along the way. So that's good.
Yes, I did.
And it's beneficial from the clinical side and from the patient side. And I think that's important, which I'll point out today. So I will ask Leo, what motivated you to build Data Biologics?
Yeah, so it's a really unique story. The company itself was founded by physicians in the regenerative medicine space. So not a typical start for a technology company, certainly not a data company. But that's actually what drew me to it and why I joined forces with the physicians was they saw a need in this new emerging space. So I think you're pretty familiar with regenerative medicine, but maybe some folks in the audience are not. The types of treatments that I'm talking about are things like platelet-rich plasma, the buzzword of stem cells, stem cells derived from your bone marrow or from your fat. The future state is stem cells derived maybe from donors or umbilical sources, or other types of stem cells that aren't yet approved by the FDA. But these physicians were pioneers in that space and were really, recognized the gap in evidence, because while these are really promising treatments that are using your own body's chemistry, your own body's cells to potentially heal you, the problem with that is there's no big pharma that stands to win. And so there's no big money to push the type of trials that meet the standards of what the way medicine has been done forever. So what that means is it's on the back of physicians who also need to put good structure to it, good science to it, not just anecdotal, or I think this might work, or hey, I just went to this weekend course, I'm going to try it out on you now. It needs to have every patient as an opportunity to study effectiveness. And most patients, the vast majority, are never going to be represented in a clinical trial for all the unique things that their body and their lifestyle and their health and their history might actually represent. So what we offer and what they built initially was a way for any physician, any provider to adopt a scientific approach to their practice without needing the burden of, the academic apparatus and the funding that is required. So we have a simple software platform that helps automate that data collection. And where I come into the picture, so I mentioned I'm the lifelong physician sidekick, I have a knack for working with unique health data. And so especially data that's being generated on emerging treatments where there's a burden of proof, the treatments are in the market, patients have the option to select it. And here in regenerative medicine, they also have to spend their own cash. It's not approved by insurance companies. So there's an even higher standard that the physicians are really looking for, but there's no industry player to help them do that. And there's no government player to help them do that. So when we got together, I saw what their vision and their need was, and I was very passionate about this field as well. So the company has evolved now from being a physician-led data collection tool to a clinical intelligence platform. So now we're producing all kinds of solutions from this data that is uniquely generated by our platform. We've developed proprietary models and algorithms that we're now using to train different AI agents depending on the type of output that's required. But most importantly, we're able to produce insights at an individual practice. Even a single doc practice can get meaningful insights on the effectiveness of the treatments that they're choosing and the products that they're adopting into practice. So the other big problem in regenerative medicine is you have a lot of companies that are selling devices and products that don't have specific indications. So we can go into kind of all the things that the FDA tends to require, but it's a gray zone. And what that means is there's a lot of players out there that are saying, yeah, here's a Me Too product. My PRP kit does this, or my shockwave device does this. But there's not really any hard evidence or approvals or indications that back that up. So physicians are private practice, they're running businesses, as I think many of your customers are doing, and they have to make decisions on which products do we buy, what systems do we set up to be able to offer these new treatments. And our platform gives them a way to not just measure that within their own practice environment, so what they're doing with their own hands, but also look across hundreds of their peers and say, oh, I see you're doing, PRP with bone marrow, and you add, 6 sessions of shockwave along the way, and your patients are doing, this, getting this much effect compared to this. And so we're really fostering and supporting the backbone of how medicine evolves, which is enabling physicians to communicate with each other about outcomes that they're seeing and about the quality and consistency of the products that they're using in their practice. And we're doing that separate from selling medical services or selling medical devices. So that makes us really a nice unbiased partner to work with both sides to help surface which treatments might be most effective for which kind of patient and under what condition.
So it's a big difference. Your company, what I'm getting, Leah, is it's a difference from what most know are clinical trials to then putting it in someone's everyday practice and pushing out real world evidence numbers. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. Yep. And while it is a different use of data in medicine, we do work with companies that are developing clinical trials or running clinical trials. So the framework for how we collect data applies whether it's done under a controlled environment or it's done in a private practice as more as a registry real-world collection. The framework is the same. So there's a value to that as well, because sometimes reproducing what happens in a trial doesn't always show up in the real world. And now we're enabling both types of data collection and analyses all under the same framework. So that we can say, yeah, the trial showed this and it consistently performs the same way in the real world too. That's the ideal. That's kind of the holy grail in healthcare is how can you create as little variation as possible and maximize the effect for the most patients with the least risk.
So there's a practitioner out there, whether it's a physician's assistant, whether it's a chiropractor, orthopedic surgeon, whoever it may be, that's out there and like, okay, we're going to try a PRP product. And if there are 10 practices that you are testing along, you're looking to see how you can bring the numbers together to make sure, okay, 9 out of 10 clinics, we had great results. What caused that 10th clinic to not get the results that everyone else had?
Right. So that's one way that our customers can use this data. But a couple of things when you're working with real world data that are important, especially working with the types of customers that we work with. So we have both, provider, physician customers, so physicians, chiropractors, nurse practitioners, physical therapists. Those are all the types of providers that we have on the platform. But we also are working with industry. So medical device companies who work with providers to collect data on their products, to run studies, to pursue FDA trials. So we have the full spectrum on the platform. And where it becomes really important when you have a large database and you're surfacing insights is to actually be very protective of both the provider and the industry while that data is gaining consensus. And so where that type of information, provider level detail and product level detail is where we're surfacing that today is in partnership with those providers or with those companies, and typically are in a medical conference environment. Where we're headed is something like a consumer reports for medicine. So a standardized ranking system that can apply to both practices and to products. And once you have a standard that the general medical community agrees, so for example, the standard that we're in conversation with our advisors and the societies that are in the space today, it's really looking at how consistently are you as a provider or this product achieving the desired effect of pain reduction, of function improvement, of high levels of patient satisfaction, low levels of adverse events or symptoms that are not tolerable for patients, and how durable are these treatments. So because we now have tens of thousands of cases in all the different lanes of these new emerging treatments, that gives us enough power behind the data. So when we talk about like AI and training models, you have to have a lot of clean data. So that's how you get the power behind the data. And so with that, over the course of the last couple of years, we've been iterating on what is the right way to, rank the outcomes, to produce how do you know when you're doing good is really the fundamental question that both industry and providers want to know. What's the bar? And so once the bar is set, then it's really on the practices and on the companies to do the work, to meet the standard. And what's great and what I love about this field is meeting the standards is actually not like, a huge challenge. I come out of robotic surgery. That was most of my career was spent in the operating room with very technical equipment, huge learning curves, lots of people involved, so lots of moving pieces. So to just decide on a whim, hey, I want to start offering, robotic surgery is kind of a big change and it requires a lot of moving pieces and a huge risk. Whereas if you're a practitioner and you have a license to inject and you treat, patients with chronic conditions, PRP might be a good option, but now you have to you're faced with, well, how do I set up my lab environment? Which centrifuge do I buy? What PRP kits do I buy? What training program do I go to? How do I do it? But those are actually things that, you can nail down in a very short period of time. And there's lots of great mentors in the space to be able to get that consistent outcome. And so I just see this as something that is much more available to the masses, so long as there's good guidance and good consensus that comes with it.
Okay. There's a lot of moving parts that you go in to talk about, which is amazing. But I think it may all come back to, there's an issue with trust in healthcare right now. Whether that's, the physician, the clinic, who do they trust from a product, or the patient, who do they trust? And I think I saw on your site, or you made a comment somewhere that says evidence by the people for the people.
Yeah.
So what does your company do to build that trust?
Yeah, so that's actually, that comes from our customers, and I would say more on the provider side. So we've been told by some of our early adopters why they like us, even though all the companies might have some tool, especially the big companies out there, they might have a tool or they have their internal data, but they've come to us and say, you guys are the providers registry. We trust the data because we're putting it in. They're paying for our subscription. They're seeing that data come right back to them without any spin from the industry before they're able to see it and use that in practice and really evaluate it. And so, and now we of course have, no, you don't want the spin from the industry on top of it. We also now have the spin from the government that is leading to a lot of chaos and questioning of, well, which science is correct and what do we listen to and what are the guidelines? So more and more and more, especially if you are a healthcare provider, you're going to be forced to make even more decisions on intuition, which has always been the case in healthcare. You're trained for years and years and years, and you see a unique population of patients that no other practitioner has seen in that order and in that volume. And so there's it's always a blend of, what did you learn in the books versus what did you learn in the real world? And no provider is exactly the same. And so with that kind of environment in mind, what we're offering is a way for physicians to feel and be in control of that information without any spin, without any filter other than the ones that they want to set on it, if they, what their interest is. So building trust, patients tend to trust the providers that they see regularly. And if their provider is recommending something, they tend to believe them. So trust is really local in medicine. It's really between those relationships between the patient and the physician and their close influencers around them. The government and the industry are there. It's part of the framework, it's the fabric of the healthcare system, but neither of those two things are trusted by anybody right now. So now it's really on the physicians to, do the work and kind of flip it on its head and have this be, for them, for their patients, and influence the system from a different direction.
Yeah. And I can see where patients can eventually learn that the result, the numbers show from a product side and from a quality patient representative side that you're proving for both sides of that, how the numbers work in your favor. That can build the trust as well. So I think that's, as you grow and continue to grow and get more people in doing it, that's only going to help both sides, the practitioner and the patient.
Right. Yeah. Even today, like how providers using our data today, let's take a really common case, a patient with knee osteoarthritis. Maybe they've had symptoms for, under a year, a little over a year. We're not talking about patients who are like, well, we got to salvage a joint replacement, or I can't even walk. I'm in a wheelchair and PRP is going to fix it. There's a certain time when these treatments are going to be the most effective, and it's typically before you're at the end of your rope. And so part of what we're trying to, get out there, our message is that there are alternatives to think about before you're out of options. And these could be good options, and they need to be brought in sooner. So doctors might have a patient come in and they can go into our platform and say, okay, I see you're a 50-year-old woman. You've had knee osteoarthritis, symptoms increasing for the last 9 months. Okay, you've tried massage and injections before. The severity of your condition, so they can kind of work and engage with our platform, provide that information, and then get back, oh, there's 1,000 other patients just like you in this database. And on average at 6 months, they're 50% better with their pain and they're very satisfied. There's tangible things that a doctor can use with a patient, first from our global registry, but then as their own practice grows and their own volume of data grows, they can start to show, hey, my practice is maybe performing better than my peers, or I'm in consistency with the practice, or forget the global database. I now have 1,000 patients and I can give you exactly my numbers. And when I talk to just everyday people about this, they're like, yeah, my doctors never showed me any data. And I'm like, they don't have any data. And the assumption is they do, but they don't, because the systems aren't there to support the doctors. They have records. Everybody's got lots and lots of records, but those are not for outcomes.
Yeah. So one thing you brought up there that I think is probably important from the practitioner side, somebody's interested in considering this, they've got to fill out their paperwork. They've got to do everything. If they're doing that, how long does it take for them to work within your system to make their practice run better? Like how much work is it to work with your company to improve their outcomes?
Yeah, so I would say that it's more about, first of all, our platform, while it's designed and can integrate with the EHR systems out there, most practices aren't set up to do so, or they're not on the level of subscription required by their EHR company to do so. So we've built a platform that can run standalone. It takes about 30 seconds to enroll a patient, but everything else is done by the patient. So they're responding to the automated text messages. So the primary burden is on that first encounter, that first treatment, making sure that a patient gets enrolled in Data Biologics so that we know the first treatment date and the baseline to the outcome surveys that are relevant for that treatment. And then the system does the work. It sends out surveys for up to 5 years following that treatment. The practices, of course, can improve upon that by, making it part of their narrative, making it part of what they do. They're an evidence-based practice. We're really passionate about evidence. We show evidence in our consults that encourages patients to be part of it, to participate with it. This is going to help other patients. And then some of our practices actually schedule their follow-ups with those patients so that they're able to check in with them around the time when surveys might be due. And so ultimately, I like to say our system's been running in the wild without research coordinators and all the money that goes into research. And we're well over 50% on responses long-term, wow, which is really good for, minimal touch approach. For practices that have implemented a high touch approach where they've kind of built it into the cadence of treatment, we're at 90+% on responses. People want to be part of it because they've decided to pay for an experimental treatment. So it's a unique, area of medicine today that has both motivated patients and providers seeking evidence. And so when they're given an easy tool to work with, it just is like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So from the business perspective of Data Biologics, what is the challenge that you're currently in? Is it getting practices to adopt? Is it educating the practitioners? Is it, the industry itself? What's the challenge that you guys are currently going through?
Yeah, it's a number of things. I would say the challenge for us, we are very passionate, as I've been expressing, about the small practices and the individual providers. And even when I say small practice, it doesn't mean it's just only 1-2 doc practices, but a lot of times it's 1 or 2 doctors within a bigger group. that are adopting these treatments that might be part of a health system or a big organization, and they don't have a big voice and they don't have a big enough footprint, and this is kind of like a side thing that they're doing, to go through the IT process and have them change all their systems. So we really want to be able to support anybody who is offering these treatments, and make it affordable to do so, and accessible. So I would say that's probably the biggest challenge for us, is we're attempting to service a market that today nobody competes with us for. And so the alternative for most practices is, if they're motivated for data, they're maybe, bringing their high school kid in over the summer and, going through the charts and making spreadsheets, and then hopefully somebody comes along that knows what to do with the spreadsheet. That's kind of the status quo of most doctors outside of academia. So we're trying to, build enough critical mass there so that we can evolve it to the next level. So the next level is, how do we take this data model and deploy what's happening with AI around it, which is super exciting, but also creates a whole level of expense that most doctors won't get to participate in because of that. So we're striking a balance right now that we're maybe one of the only ones that wants to really service the everyday physician practice versus just the large organizations. Yeah. But we're keeping that in our mission. I would say that's our biggest challenge too, is that we want to do that, and it's part of our mission.
Okay, so if there are healthcare business owners out there listening or watching, whatever it may be, why should they consider joining up with Data Biologics and getting on your platform? What's the true benefit to them?
Yeah, so the true benefit to them, just in their own, our entry-level subscription for providers is $1,500 a year. And if they are offering a PRP treatment, let's say most are offering those treatments anywhere between $750 and $2,000 a treatment. So our, pitch is, if you have one or two patients a year that feel more confident with you and say yes to treatment faster, it more than pays for itself. Mm-hmm. And then not to mention the other things that you get from collecting data on your treatments, especially ones that are considered experimental, is now you have a repository of data that, should something go wrong potentially in the future, you have a way to say, this is truly an anomaly. My practice is very much like these hundreds of other practices and these tens of thousands of cases. So there's also a controlling of risk element that is important when you are offering new treatments, to show I'm doing this in an evidence-based way. So there's that. And then there's also the product selection, challenge your reps to trial. Let me try this, let me do 10 cases and see how they go. I'm going to try to, those are the kinds of things that we're starting to see happen now with all these, every day there's a new biologic company popping up with some Me Too product that, who knows, maybe, if it works or doesn't work. So that's what it
could be the best, but the evidence will prove it being the best or not.
Yeah. Right. And maybe it worked great for the guy that you had do a very controlled, limited, focused study. But what about in my practice? I have a new MA every 30 days. I have a patient population that I get fed, lots of people with chronic conditions. Maybe it doesn't work so well with these. So we want to kind of cover those bases, and make sure that, all physicians have the option to be evidence-based practice.
I love that. And they all should. As a chiropractor, when I was in practice, whether it was with an orthopedic surgeon, in my own practice with my wife, who's a physical therapist and athletic trainer, we should want to have outcomes, because it's just not good when a patient comes in and they, how are you doing? Well, that's the one word that is not very good, is, well, it's, and you can say, well, visit one, you said this, we've got some incremental improvements. Sometimes we'll go down a little bit, but it's always important having statistics and data. Numbers don't lie. At least good clinicians and good scientists help so numbers don't lie. At least that's what we hope for, moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would say the thing that I find maybe providers are nervous about that too, because they've never done that. Maybe the numbers won't be good. And I would say the vast majority of practices on our platform, maybe there are certain cases that didn't go according to the rest, but the majority are seeing positive improvements in outcomes. And if they're not, they're going to the conferences, they're going to the Interventional Orthobiologics Foundation meetings, they're going to the Orthobiologic Institute, the Biologic Associate. There's many organizations now that are incorporating the data that we have in our registry, because we have vastly more data on many treatments than exists in the clinical literature today. So what we're finding now is speakers at these conferences, trainers who teach other providers how to do it, they're doing kind of a hybrid of the traditional way. Like, here's this clinical paper where they studied 20 people and it looked like this, and the call for more evidence. So they'll demonstrate what's in the high level evidence alongside the thousands of cases who had this treatment and with XYZ conditions recorded, and this was the outcome. So physicians who attend these kinds of conferences now are already starting to get accustomed to the presence of our registry data right alongside clinical evidence. So it's just helping accelerate getting to consensus and a standard much faster than any other field has had available to do before.
Okay. Well, I've got a few more questions for you, but one of them, as the CEO, Leah, of Data Biologics, how do you see your role reshaping medicine's relationship with evidence and innovation over the next 3 to 5 years?
Boy, yeah, that's a big one. I think it really starts with almost exactly what I was just describing, working with the thought leaders and those who are passionate about education in physician, those who are passionate about ethical treatment, ethical adoption, evidence-based practice. And so really, I don't see myself necessarily being the one to do all the work. It's going to be in collaboration with all of these different providers. And it's also not just one specialty. As you know, if you trained up in the chiropractor lane, like, you have your sphere of influence and your kind of framework of education and thinking that exists within the chiropractic domain, but it's very different in physical medicine, which is very different again from orthopedic surgery and very different again from neurology. So each one of those circles has to have their own kind of language and consensus around, even if it's exactly the same treatment that everybody's doing for exactly the same problem. They all speak to it differently and think about it differently. So my role in that is really being the listener and being and understanding and interpreting, like translating, okay, this is what you're saying and seeing in practice over here in this domain, and what's happening over here in this domain. And many times physicians don't get to cross over domains much once you're out into practice. Yeah. You're kind of like in your lane. And so I've gotten the benefit of getting to work across all the domains and becoming a trusted sidekick to many. And because of that, I have a unique ability to translate across the domains, and also represent the physicians and the providers to the industry and to the administrative layer in healthcare, because I spent much of my career on that side of the business. So it's that's what I think my role is more than anything, is as a translator and as somebody who can build consensus and trust in the different silos of medicine.
Okay, so if we'll share all of your links, because I want people, whether it's patients that want to reach out to you and say, hey, how do I get my doctor on this? Or whether it's a doctor that says, hey, how do I get involved with Data Biologics? How would you suggest people reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah. So if they go to our website, www.databiologics.com, and in fact, probably by the time this episode is out, we will have our whole new website up. So we're building kind of a patient entry point for Data Biologics. So our first iteration is not yet going to have a provider locator, but we now have hundreds of providers on the platform. And as I mentioned before, we're building a consensus that's kind of setting the bar. What's a good practice look like? And so we want patients to be able to find the doctors that are consistently showing a good outcome and treating a lot of patients, committed to evidence. They will be on our website for patients to find, as well as more insights and information on the different treatments and experiences people are having in the industry.
Okay. All right, so now I'm going to have you take the CEO hat off, and I want you to put the personal hat on, and that would be you're on the Prime Health podcast. What is your personal definition of Prime Health?
Prime health. Wow. Okay. So for me, I think it's about living well and feeling healthy and having enough energy to help other people find that too. Like that's kind of the way that I want to live is just, fully in my my zone of genius, so to speak.
Yeah.
So and so that's my definition of health, being no aches and pains, feeling energetic, feeling hopeful, and feeling compassionate for other people, and wanting to give versus feeling like it's all being taken every day. So that's I guess that's what prime means to me.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. It was kind of, I like to ask that of everybody because everybody has their own unique perspective on it. So, you taking a different position and approach on that, I really do appreciate it. So, Leah, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm sure we could bring you back again and cover multiple topics. Like we could cover specifically the physician side of it. We could cover specifically the patient side of it. And maybe we'll have a conversation that down the road we can bring that back. Especially once you start to get that physician director, I think that will be an important part that more and more physicians will want to be part of that. It's the fear of missing out, if you wish. You don't want to be left behind. Yeah,
exactly.
But thank you. You give us a full spectrum idea of what healthcare is advancing, how it's changing, how your company can change it from the physician side and from the patient side. So I always tell people, of course, you and I would love our message to get out there. But if there's one person, whether it's a physician, a practice owner, it's a patient, that's like, I'm a little bit afraid of PRP. Maybe I should reach out to, Data Biologics and say, this is the company I need to be associated with. Who can I find somebody? So we want you to share it for that purpose. Of course, for me, I'd love you to share the podcast. We'd love to have more people on it. But as we wrap up here, again, until next time, I always say, remember that true wellness is a journey that we are all on together, whether you're taking charge of your own health or helping others with theirs. We just ask that you stay committed to your Prime Health journey. Again, Leah, thank you very much for being a guest on the Prime Health podcast.
Thanks, Derek. It's a great conversation.